Okay, we're going to talk about creating rule tables today. This is going to go over briefly what we did in week 4. So we're going to talk through how to build a rule table, how to build a schematic to support our rule table. And then we can apply our rule table to our pattern. So in this handout from week 4, I gave a MINS T graded spec. So in this particular case, I did not give pattern measurements. I just gave pattern grade movements. So we don't have to go through the process of extracting like we did in the previous week. Instead, what we're going to do is use these movements to figure out where the grade should go around our pattern. Okay, so I have pulled up a schematic here. Just as a reminder, if you want to create schematics in Illustrator, to get your pattern shapes in, you can do this. This is a different pattern, but this is the general idea. If you go to verify and say copy to clipboard, it will copy anything that's in your current pattern screen. So make sure your patterns are visible. Okay, and then you can come into Illustrator. Okay, and you can paste. So I just hit Control V. Okay, it'll bring in everything that was on your screen. And then you simply just have to ungroup them and release the clipping mask. Okay, so right click ungroup, right click release clipping mask. And now your pieces are editable. So they're still all grouped together, but you can change the stroke weight to make them a little bit more visible. You can remove your internal lines. You can do all sorts of things here. Okay, so that is how I got my pattern pieces here for this demonstration. So to figure out our grade rules, we have these base, we have these base specs, too many things open, and these base grade movements. So for example, we know the body length is going to move 3/4 of an inch per size. However, on our pattern, that could be all added at the bottom, that could be all added at the top, or it could be distributed. So the first thing we have to do is determine our stacking point. So you see I have a red star here because I've determined my stacking point to be in the middle of my center front and center back. This is pretty standard for tops. And in the center of my sleeve, so my sleeve will grow in both directions, sideways on the x-axis and on the y-axis. Okay. Some sleeves you may stack at the bottom, some sleeves you may stack at the sleeve cap, but today we're going to stack in the middle. So this determining the stacking point beforehand, we've talked about how to restack in AccuMark and why we might do that. But the purpose of this is to determine where our movements are going to be, because we're going to build grade rules that have positives and negatives built into them. So if we change our stacking point, those positive and negatives will change. So it's very important that we determine these stacking points ahead of time. So let's start. I would like to start not at the top of the spec. I'd like to start with the body circumferences, the bust, where are we? Bust, waist, sweep. Okay, so right now our bust is grading 2 inches down, 1.5 inches down, and then 1.5 inches up, and 1.5 inches up. So we've talked about how circumference measurements have to be distributed across all panels. So typically we have 4 panels when we're working in AccuMark. So we have 2 fronts and 2 backs, but we're only working on 1 front and 1 back. So we need to take those movements. I'm going to try and see if I can do this so you guys can see everything. All right, cool. So we're going to try to distribute this 1.5 to 1.5, 1.5 across these panels. So what that really is going to look like is a 1/2 inch, 3/8, 3/8, 3/8. Okay, because essentially I'm taking 2 and I'm dividing it by 4. I'm taking 1.5 inches and I'm dividing it by 4. Okay, so that means that here at my side seam, right, I have arrows going out at all 3 specs. So this is my bust, this is my waist, this is my sweep. So if I was on a whiteboard, this might be a little easier because I would just draw it, but I'm going to try this and see if this will work. So what that means is I've got, if I list this in order of smallest to largest, I have 3/8, I have a 1/2, I have 3/8, and I have 3/8. Okay, so these are my movements for my sizes. Make this smaller. Okay, so we'll talk about positives and negatives in a little bit. Right now, we're just determining the amounts that we want to go on each of these positions. Okay, so I've got my 3/8, 1/2, 3/8, 3/8. Then if I go over here and I look at my waist and my sweep, the grade is the same. Don't always assume that your bust, waist, and sweep will be the same. In some cases, brands may want to reduce their waist more or grade their hip a little bit more. But today they're the same. So I'm going to take this same Y movement and I'm going to put it at my waist and I'm going to put it at my bust. Okay, right here. All right. Now, so this is my Y movement, okay, for my bust, waist, and hip. Now, if I want to, let's keep with our Y movements. Let's talk about shoulders and across front, across back. So our shoulder widths and cross front and cross back typically grade the same. This particular spec says they're grading 3/4 inch for every size. So with shoulder widths and across front and back widths, we're just measuring flat. So we're measuring from the shoulder point across to the other shoulder point on a flat garment, which means in this case, we are measuring from shoulder point to center front, center back on both front and back. Okay, so that means our measurement, which is our grade movement, which is 3/4 inch, is going to be divided in half, right? So we want 1/2 of the 3/4 on this side and 1/2 of the 3/4 on this side. Same with the back. So I'm going to take 3/4 and I'm going to divide it by 2 and I get 3/8 of an inch. Okay, and it's the same for every size. So I'm going to alter this to say 3/8. Okay, and I can do the same on my back. All right, and you know my bust, waist, sweep, same on the back. So we know that with patterns, oftentimes our fronts and backs shapes are different. However, our grades will always be the same. There are cases where they may be different, like we'll make the front and back neck drop a little bit different. But otherwise, the general grade should be the same to maintain the proportion front to back. Okay. So next I need to do my neck width. Okay. So I am gonna look, cross front, cross back is the same as shoulder. I forgot to finish that. Okay, so the Y movement is the same exact as the shoulder. So now if we look at our neck width is a quarter, 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 quarter. Okay, so same with the shoulder widths and the across front and back widths. My neck width is measured from center front to high point shoulder and center back to high point shoulder. Okay, so I'm going to take that neck width movement and I'm going to divide it by 2. So I have a quarter of an inch divided by 2 is an eighth of an inch. So I'm going to change all of these to be an eighth, an eighth, an eighth, and an eighth. Okay, so every size is moving up or down an eighth of an inch. Okay, all right. So let's see what's left. We have neck drop. So I think we're done in our Y directions, right? So we know how much this body is growing and shrinking per size. Okay, and so now we need to do our X movements. So let's do our length first and we'll do our neck drop last, and you'll understand why when we get there. So my length is grading 3/4 of an inch per size. Okay, so because my stacking point is in the center of my center front, center back, I want half of that length grade here, and I want half of that length grade here. Okay, so half of 3/4 is 3/8 of an inch. So I am going to take my 3/8 of an inch grade, okay, and I'm going to move it in the X direction. Okay, so now, for example, this point is moving an eighth of an inch in the Y direction and 3/8 of an inch in the X direction. Okay. Okay, and then I need my other 3/8 to go on my bottom. So my bottom hem is going to grade 3/8 of an inch per size. At center front, center back, and at the side seam. Okay, so let's put this down here, and let's put this down here. Okay, all right. So the reason I wanted to do that first is that now my front neck drop and my back neck drop are dependent on this point right here. Okay, so this point is moving in the X direction. So I can't just slap on my grade movement for my front neck drop here, or this isn't going to work out. So for example, my front neck drop grade is an eighth of an inch. Okay, but if I move this an eighth of an inch and this is moving 3/8 of an inch, the difference is actually going to be a quarter. So I'd end up with a quarter grade for my front neck drop. So really I have to take the movement I want, an eighth of an inch, subtract it from what's already moving, right? So when this shoulder point moves, is if this point here has no grade, the front neck drop is actually going to grade 3/8 of an inch. If I give the front neck drop the same grade as the shoulder, so it moves with the shoulder, then which would be 3/8, 3/8, 3/8, then my actual front neck drop spec grade would be 0. Okay, so if these 2 points have the same grade movement on the pattern, the difference between them will remain 0. Okay, so what I have to do is take 3/8 of an inch, subtract my eighth of an inch grade, and you get a quarter of an inch. Okay, so this will actually end up being a quarter of an inch per size. Okay, so if I do this, then the resulting grade, so this is moving 3/8, this is moving a quarter. So the difference between these two measurements will grow an eighth of an inch per size. Okay, so on the back neck drop, I have 0 grade, which means I need to move my my back neck drop the same as my shoulder. So that difference never changes. It's always going to be the same difference between the two sizes. Okay.